The member for Dawson.
Mr Speaker, my mother would turn blue when she had her fits. I grew up in a family where disabilities were a lived experience every single day. My father lost a leg to cancer when he was 19, before I was even a twinkle in his eye, and my mother was an epileptic who also had cerebral palsy. And while, as a child of parents with disabilities, you got to understand the difficulties that people with disabilities have to put up with on a daily basis, nothing was more shocking than watching your mother turn blue when she was having an epileptic fit. And she would alarm us by crossing her arms or folding her arms and asking for my father's help before she went into one of her epileptic fits. But you know, my dad, he was out making a living, driving taxis so he could have food on the table. So he couldn't be there all of the time, and certainly wasn't there a lot of the time when she had her fits and was calling for help. And even then, as an 8-year-old kid, I knew that when Mum did that, you had to take her on the floor, put her on the floor, in case she fell off a chair that she was sitting on or fell over. But then her eyes would roll back into her head, and sometimes she would stop breathing and her face would turn blue. And I would literally smack her on the face, because as an 8-year-old it was the only thing I could think to snap her out of it. You know, and I never knew whether that would be the last memory of my mother, and to think of that as an 8-year-old kid. And all because the support services for people in her situation were non-existent. So I know too well why a national disability insurance scheme is needed in this country, and certainly I'm very proud that the government and the Liberal National Coalition strongly supports the National Disability Insurance Scheme. But Mr Speaker, forgive me for this one negative shot, but I know why I also bristle every time I hear disabilities, and indeed the NDIS proposal, being politicised. And when I do hear the Prime Minister say that the NDIS is a, quote, great Labor reform, unquote, as if the Liberal National Coalition is somehow against it, well, to me that's politicising disabilities. And as someone who had to revive their epileptic mother from unconsciousness several times, it's quite frankly disgusting. National Disability Services, the peak body for non-government disability services, gives an apt description of the National Disability Insurance Scheme. They say it will be an entitlement-based funding mechanism which will provide flexible, person-centred supports so that people can participate in ordinary daily life. It will provide people with a disability, their families and their carers, with the ongoing care, support, therapy and equipment they need. Most importantly, it will be individualised and person-centred, with support based on the personal choices of either the person with a disability, their family or their carers. And this is the fundamentally great thing about the NDIS: empowerment. It lets individuals and families decide what services will best fit them, rather than have some bureaucrat in the state capital work it out on a desktop model. It opens up competition and opportunity in the disability services sector, which is good for both the person with disabilities, as they will have affordable choices for service provision, but also for disability service providers, as they will have greater certainty in terms of long-term service demand. In my electorate of Dawson, we have many quality organisations working in the field of disability support. Organisations such as Kutharinga and Getty, Mackay Lifestyle Choices, MADEC, CQ Community and In-Home Care, Bowen Flexi Care, the Burdekin Flexible Support Services, Bowen Community the Burdekin Community Association, Lifestream Mackay, Blue Care and the Endeavour Foundation. These local organisations provide quality care services and make life easier for their clients, people with disabilities and the families and carers of those with disabilities. They are great local service providers in my electorate, but I know they could provide so much more for their clients if there was a better, more streamlined funding system that their clients had access to. But the benefits of the NDIS go beyond just people with disabilities and disability service providers. It actually benefits the entire nation. As the leader of the Liberal National Coalition and opposition leader has said, one of the great things about the National Disability Insurance Scheme is that it will give people with disabilities and their carers more opportunity to be productive and more opportunity to participate in our economy. The opposition leader went on to say words that aptly express my feelings about the NDIS, and I quote, "That's why it's not just a cost," he said. "Over time, it's an investment in a better society and in a stronger economy." The NDIS isn't about handouts. It's not about charity. It's about an investment in our future. National Disability Services says that timely interventions, appropriate aids and equipment, training and development would become investment in individual capacity rather than welfare. The scheme would therefore lead to more positive results for people with a disability, their families and carers, as well as being fiscally responsible. It is for these reasons that the Liberal National Coalition believes that the National Disability Insurance Scheme is an idea whose time has come. Earlier this year, the opposition leader, on behalf of the entire Liberal National Coalition, released a statement which deserves putting on the parliamentary record. He said, "Right now, the treatment given to people with disabilities depends upon how the disability was incurred and which state it happened in. Most rely on state government-funded disability services where demand always outstrips supply. It's wrong that people's treatment should depend upon the litigation lottery or more upon what the system can afford other than upon people's needs. The National Disability Insurance Scheme should be a new project that unites Australians. It has to be done responsibly, but it does have to be done. The Coalition will do what we reasonably can to make the NDIS happen and accept a government invitation to be jointly responsible for this vital national project." On the 13th of April this year, the opposition leader sent a letter here to the Prime Minister putting forward the concept of creating a parliamentary NDIS committee that would ensure policy stability for the proposal until its full implementation. There was no written response, but merely a brush-off that was put in the media. On the 27th of April, the opposition leader repeated the offer to the Prime Minister, but this offer was formally rejected. As we know, the implementation of the NDIS as proposed by the Productivity Commission will take 7 years, spanning the life of 3 parliaments and quite possibly different governments. That offer by the opposition leader was sadly rejected. So now a new offer lies on the table for the government and for this parliament in the form of my motion. Upon passage of the motion in this place and in a concurrent motion in the other place, this parliament would resolve to immediately establish a joint select committee on National Disability Insurance Scheme which would oversee the implementation of that scheme. It would be subject to terms of references to be agreed upon by the Prime Minister and opposition leader and ratified by this House. It would be jointly chaired by a government member and an opposition member, and most importantly remain in existence until the full implementation of the NDIS is achieved. This joint committee today that I propose is the only vehicle for true bipartisanship on this issue. National Disability Services Chief Executive Ken Baker has issued a statement this morning in light of this motion being brought before the Parliament today. I want to read a section of this statement. Dr Baker says, "If you compare the progress towards building the NDIS to a race in the Paralympics, we are 20 metres into a 400-metre race. You don't get a gold for leading at the 20-metre mark. You have to keep your head down and keep working. When it comes to the NDIS, we need all parliaments to keep working at building the scheme. I don't think anyone in the disability community thinks that we have won the NDIS. We know that neither political party has outlined how they will fully fund the scheme. We also know that the discussions around the funding will involve federal, state and territories parliaments. Parties at both levels of government should recognise that this is a long-term reform which requires support from both sides of politics. To deliver the NDIS in full, political opponents across successive parliaments, both federally and in the states, are going to be required to work together for the greater good. The truth remains that before the NDIS is locked in, we will need both political parties to outline how they intend to fully fund the scheme. And this finally, Mr Speaker, we will also need both political parties to commit to true political collaboration on the design and rollout of the NDIS. Well, Dr Baker is right. We're at the 20-metre mark of a 400-metre race in the Paralympics, and after the next election or the one after that, this could very well be a relay race where the baton needs to be passed to a different player. On National Disability Services campaign posters for the NDIS, they've run the line, "It's time to make every Australian count." And indeed, that has been the campaign slogan for the NDIS movement. Well, right now, Mr Deputy Speaker, It's time for this parliament to count when it comes to the NDIS. Let's put aside petty politics, join together on the NDIS and make this work for the betterment of our nation.